One day he was everywhere, running recoveries, keeping the whole operation moving, showing up in nearly every video like the guy the whole thing would fall apart without. Then, quietly, he was gone. No blow-up, no dramatic exit, no farewell video with a tearful speech. Fans of Matt's off-road recovery just started noticing that Jefe had stopped showing up, and the comment sections filled up fast. Where did he go? Did something happen between him and Matt? Did 16 years of service, 2 careers, and more behind-the-scenes work than most people will ever know about just end without a word? The thing is, almost nobody told the full story, and the pieces that did surface were scattered across a TikTok here, a forum post there, buried under speculation from people who didn't have the full picture. So that's what we're doing today, because the real story of what happened to Jefe, where he went, why he left, and what he's building now, isn't a story about drama or fallout. It's about a man who spent years making everyone else look good, finally deciding it was his turn, and it's a better story than most people realize. To understand why any of this matters, you first have to understand who Jefe actually is, because the channel name doesn't tell you much, and the man himself was never the type to make noise about his own story. His real name is Jeff, and for anyone who spent time in the MOR fanbase, that probably tracks. He never came across as someone chasing a persona, but somewhere along the way, the crew started calling him Jefe, and it stuck. In Spanish, Jefe means boss, not a nickname handed out loosely, and not one he gave himself. The people working alongside him every day just started using it naturally because it fit. He was Matt Wetzel's nephew, yes, but that family connection only explains how he ended up in the orbit of Matt's off-road recovery. It doesn't explain why he became the second most important person in it. What most viewers didn't know, and what the channel never really made a point of spelling out, is that Jefe was running 2 lives at the same time for years. While he was helping build one of the most watched off-road channels on YouTube, he was also serving in the United States Army National Guard. 16 years, that's not a part-time commitment you fit in around a busy schedule. That's a sustained, disciplined dedication to something most people wouldn't sign up for once, let alone maintain for the better part of 2 decades. Think about what that actually looks like in practice. You've got recovery jobs to run, a crew to manage, a channel operation that keeps growing and demanding more, and underneath all of that, a military obligation that doesn't pause because the content calendar is busy. Jefe carried both without making either one look like a burden. That kind of discipline doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from the way a person is wired. By the time the MOR channel had grown into something with millions of subscribers and an audience that genuinely cared about everyone on that crew, Jefe had quietly become the man Matt leaned on most when something needed to actually get done. Not the loudest voice in the room, not the one the camera gravitated toward, just the one who showed up, handled his business, and kept the whole thing moving. That's the guy we're talking about. And once you understand that, everything that happened next makes a lot more sense. There's a version of Matt's off-road recovery that most people watched. The recoveries, the builds, the chaotic moments where something inevitably goes sideways in the best possible way. And then there's the version that made all of that possible, the one that never made the thumbnail. That version had Jefe's fingerprints all over it. His official responsibilities read like a job description for 3 different people: accounts, budget, the website, crew scheduling and rosters, human resources, marketing, asset and property management. And that's before you factor in the physical side of the work, because Jefe wasn't sitting behind a desk while the rest of the crew pulled vehicles out of the Utah backcountry. He was out there too, running his black Ford Super Duty on recoveries, getting his hands dirty the same way everyone else did. The difference was that when the camera stopped rolling, he still had a full second shift waiting for him. Matt has always been upfront about his own personality, impulsive, instinct-driven, the kind of guy who figures things out as he goes. That approach works on camera. It makes for great content, but a real business doesn't run on instinct alone, and Matt knew it. Jefe was the counterbalance. Where Matt moved fast, Jefe planned. Where Matt improvised, Jefe had already thought 3 steps ahead and prepared for what could go wrong. That contrast wasn't a source of tension, it was exactly why the operation held together as well as it did for as long as it did. What makes this worth paying attention to is how little of it ever surfaced on screen. Audiences connected with Matt, with Jamie, with Rudy, with Lizzie, the people the camera naturally gravitated toward. Jefe was there in the background, doing the work that kept the whole machine running, and most viewers only had a vague sense of how much that actually amounted to. Tucker was brought on specifically to take some of the editing load off Jefe's plate. That one detail says a lot. When the workload gets heavy enough that a dedicated hire is brought in just to help with one slice of what a single person was managing, that single person was carrying more than anyone outside the operation fully appreciated. Jefe never complained about it publicly, never made a point of reminding anyone what he contributed. He just kept showing up and getting it done, which, as it turns out, is exactly the kind of person Matt would eventually go out of his way to take care of. By 2023, the More channel had grown into something neither Matt nor Jefe could have mapped out on paper when they started. Millions of subscribers, a fan base that genuinely invested in the people on screen, not just the recoveries themselves. Events like the off-road record games, which had become a proper production in their own right, and Jefe was right in the middle of organizing all of it. That year, he showed up to the record games and gave away his own Can-Am Maverick as the prize, a side-by-side that any serious off-road enthusiast would hold on to without a second thought. Gone. No fanfare, no drawn-out moment about what a sacrifice it was. That was just how Jefe operated. He saw an opportunity to make something bigger and better for the people around him, and he took it without needing a round of applause for doing it. Matt noticed. He always noticed. What came next was the kind of thing that doesn't happen often enough in any workplace, let alone one that runs on YouTube content and Utah desert dust. Matt and Jamie started quietly putting together a plan. They knew Jefe had his eye on the new Ford Bronco, had talked about it the way you talk about something you want but haven't convinced yourself to pull the trigger on yet. So they went and found one, a gray 2023 Ford Bronco Wildtrak Sasquatch. Then they built a cover story around it, the way only a recovery channel could. A staged rescue, designed specifically to get Jefe to the right place at the right time without him suspecting a thing. He showed up thinking he was heading out on a job. He left with a Bronco. The moment landed the way these things do when they're genuinely earned rather than manufactured for content. There was no scripted speech, no production trick that made it feel bigger than it was. It was just a man who had spent years quietly holding everything together, finally being seen for it in a way that went beyond a paycheck or a thank you. The two took the Bronco out to Easter Jeep Safari in Moab shortly after, putting it through terrain that pushes even purpose-built rigs to their limits. Jefe was protective of his new ride from the start, which, given what it represented, made complete sense. But even with a brand new Bronco and the kind of loyalty that's hard to find anywhere, something bigger was already shifting beneath the surface. A decision was coming that no surprise reveal could slow down. Most people who follow off-road channels don't spend a lot of time thinking about what the people on screen are carrying outside of the content. That's not a criticism, it's just how it works. You see the recoveries, you see the crew, and the rest of their lives exists somewhere off-camera, in a place the algorithm never reaches. For Jefe, that off-camera life included 16 years of active service in the United States Army National Guard, 16 years of obligation, discipline, and commitment running parallel to everything he was building at More. 2 demanding careers, operating at the same time for the better part of 2 decades. By mid-2024, that military chapter was coming to a close. Retiring from the Guard after that length of service isn't just a logistical change, it's a shift in identity. When a significant portion of who you are has been defined by service, by structure, by showing up when you're called regardless of what else is happening in your life, stepping away from that carries a weight that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. The uniform comes off, the obligation ends, and suddenly there's a version of your future that looks completely open in a way it hasn't in a very long time. For most people, that kind of transition comes with a period of uncertainty. What comes next? What does life look like without the structure that's been there for so long? Jefe already had his answer. What the retirement actually did was create space, room to finally ask what he wanted to build for himself rather than what he was needed for by someone else. He had given years to the Guard, and years before that to making OR run the way it needed to run. He had earned the right to point that same energy somewhere of his own choosing. Matt saw it clearly. By all accounts, he didn't wait for Jefe to come to him with a plan or a hesitant conversation about possibly thinking about doing something different someday. He pushed. He told his nephew directly, "Go follow your own path. Go do what you've always wanted to do. The channel will be fine." That kind of send-off means something. It's one thing to leave a job. It's another to leave with the person you built it alongside telling you they're proud of where you're headed. Jefe had spent 16 years serving his country, and years more serving someone else's vision. Now it was finally time to build something of his own. When someone disappears from a channel as popular as Matt's off-road recovery, the internet has a way of filling in the blanks. Speculation moves fast, and it rarely moves in the charitable direction. People assume money, they assume ego. They assume something happened behind closed doors that nobody is talking about because a clean exit without drama doesn't generate the same kind of engagement as a falling out. So let's be direct about what the evidence actually shows. Because Jefe didn't disappear quietly. He explained it himself. He posted a video on TikTok addressing it head-on. The message was straightforward. He talked about his journey alongside Matt, about the Army National Guard career that had just wrapped up, and about what came next. No shots fired. No carefully worded statements designed to protect anyone's reputation while quietly implying something darker underneath. Just a man explaining that one chapter had ended and another was beginning, and that both of those things were true at the same time without one canceling out the other. The framing matters. Jefe didn't frame leaving Emor as walking away from something bad. He framed it as walking towards something he'd been waiting to get to. That's a meaningful distinction, and it lines up with everything else known about how the departure actually unfolded. Matt encouraged it. Jamie supported it. The relationship between Jefe and the people he'd spent years working alongside didn't fracture, it just changed shape. And the proof of that is still visible in the content. Jefe still shows up on Emor, not as a full-time crew member with a roster of responsibilities keeping the whole operation running, but as someone who genuinely wants to be there when he is. That's different from a cordial professional arrangement where two people tolerate each other in front of a camera for the sake of the audience. The ease between him and Matt on screen hasn't changed, because the reality off-screen hasn't changed either. What changed is the primary focus. Jefe's time and energy now belong to his own channel first, with Emor getting whatever he chooses to bring back to it. For someone who spent years running other people's priorities before his own, that's not a small thing. There's a version of this story where the comment section gets to be right, where something went wrong and nobody will admit it. But the version that actually holds up under scrutiny is far simpler. Jefe left because he was ready, and everyone who mattered already knew it was coming. So what does a man like Jefe actually do when he finally has the space to build something entirely his own? He goes outside. Jefe's Adventures is exactly what the name suggests, and that simplicity is part of the point. No gimmick, no manufactured drama engineered to keep a comment section arguing. The channel is built around the outdoor life Jefe has always gravitated toward. Camping, survival skills, bushcraft, fishing, off-roading. The kind of content that requires you to actually know what you're doing, because the wilderness has a way of exposing people who are faking it. Jefe isn't faking it. This is genuinely how he lives, which gives the channel a groundedness that's harder to manufacture than most people realize. There's an honesty to that approach that fits the man. He spent years at MAR doing work that required precision and reliability. The books had to balance, the schedules had to hold, the logistics had to work. That same methodical quality comes through in the content he's putting out now. It doesn't feel like someone who woke up one day and decided to become a YouTuber. It feels like someone who finally had the time to document a life he was already living. One detail stands out as particularly telling. Jefe has never been comfortable with the computer side of content creation. The editing, the post-production, the hours in front of a screen turning raw footage into something an audience will actually watch. Matt's team still handles that work for him. On the surface, that might look like a loose end, a remnant of the old arrangement that hasn't fully untangled itself yet, but it also says something about the relationship that survived the professional separation. Matt isn't just an uncle who wished him well and moved on. He's still invested in seeing Jefe succeed. The channel is early. The subscriber numbers don't reflect the MOR audience Jefe spent years helping build, and nobody with a realistic understanding of how YouTube works would expect them to yet. But the foundation underneath it is stronger than the metrics currently show. There is an entire fan base that already knows who Jefe is, already respects what he's about, and already has a reason to follow him somewhere new. That's not something most first-time creators get to start with. He's not chasing viral moments or trying to outproduce channels with larger teams and bigger budgets. He's building something that reflects who he actually is. For a man with 16 years of patience already behind him, that's not a weakness, that's a strategy. Here's the thing about Jefe's story that doesn't get said enough. He didn't leave more because something broke. He left because everything he'd built had given him exactly what he needed to take the next step. 16 years of military service, Years of holding together one of the most demanding operations in off-road YouTube. A network of people who respected him enough to keep him in their corner even after the professional arrangement changed. That's not a story about someone falling out of the spotlight. That's a story about someone who was never chasing it in the first place and who finally had the freedom to prove it. Jefe's Adventures is still finding its footing, and Jefe himself would probably be the first to tell you he's in no rush. He's never been the type to force something before it's ready. He plans, he prepares, and then he executes. The audience that followed him through years of Utah desert recoveries knows what he's capable of. The only thing left is watching him do it on his own terms. So if you've been wondering what really happened to Jefe, now you know. The adventure didn't end. It just finally got his name on it.